My 8-year-old daughter was lying face down on the hallway floor when I came home 3 days early from a business trip. Her backpack was still beside the stairs. One shoe had come off. Her right hand was curled beneath her chest, and for one terrifying second, I couldn't tell whether she was breathing. Tessa. I dropped my suitcase and ran to her. She didn't move. I turned her carefully onto her side and saw how pale her face was. Tessa, sweetheart, open your eyes. Nothing. Then I heard slow, shallow breaths. Behind me, a glass touched the kitchen counter. My wife, Tasha, stood in the doorway wearing workout clothes, watching us with an expression so calm it frightened me. "What happened?" I demanded. "She's fine, Kevin. She's unconscious," Tasha sighed. "She's being dramatic. We had an argument and she threw one of her little fits." I stared at her. An 8-year-old doesn't pass out because she's dramatic. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. Tasha stepped toward me. "Kevin, don't make this into something it isn't." That sentence stayed with me. Before I tell you what happened next, subscribe to Calm Life Stories and tell me in the comments where you're listening from today. My name is Kevin James. I was 41 years old and I made my living negotiating corporate acquisitions. I spent 15 years learning to recognize when people were hiding something across a conference table. But that evening, kneeling beside my daughter in our Naperville home, I realized I might have failed to notice something far more important happening inside my own family. I had been in Denver for work and wasn't supposed to return until Sunday. The negotiations ended early, so I changed my flight without telling anyone. I wanted to surprise Tessa. Instead, I found her on the floor. The 911 operator kept me talking while I monitored her breathing. Tasha paced behind me. She was tired after school, she said. Then she got upset because I took away her tablet. "How long has she been lying here?" "Maybe 10 minutes. I looked up sharply. "And you didn't call anyone?" "Because she does this for attention." Tessa had never done anything remotely like this in front of me. She was quiet, observant, the kind of child who apologized when someone else bumped into her. I touched her forehead. "Cool, too cool. What did she eat?" "Normal food." "Did she take medicine?" Tasha's expression tightened. "Why would you ask that?" "Because she's unconscious." Sirens approached before she answered. 2 paramedics entered with a 3rd responder carrying equipment. The older paramedic introduced himself as Reyes and immediately knelt beside Tessa. Oxygen, pulse, blood pressure. Questions came rapidly. "Any medical conditions?" "No," I said. "Allergies?" "None." "Current medications?" "None." Tasha interrupted. "She sometimes takes allergy medicine." Reyes looked at her. "What kind?" "Just over-the-counter stuff." "How much today?" "I don't know." Something changed in his face. He looked down at Tessa, then around the hallway. His eyes settled on the staircase, the kitchen doorway, then me. "Sir, you live here?" "Yes." "You're her father?" "Yes." He studied me for another second. "Have we met before?" "No." Reyes looked back at Tessa. "Are you sure?" My stomach tightened. "I'm sure." His partner prepared the stretcher. Reyes lowered his voice. "Mr. Wood, have you been away recently?" "Denver?" "Since Monday?" He glanced at Tasha. She had stopped pacing. "Why?" I asked. Reyes didn't answer immediately. "Let's get your daughter stabilized first." They lifted Tessa onto the stretcher. As they moved toward the door, her eyelids fluttered but didn't open. I followed. Tasha caught my arm. "I'll drive separately." "Why?" "I need to change." I looked at my unconscious daughter being carried toward an ambulance, then at my wife, worrying about changing clothes. "Do whatever you want." Outside, Reyes stopped me before I climbed into the ambulance. "Mr. Jamie, I need to ask you something privately." Tasha remained inside the house. "What?" He glanced toward the front door. "You said you've never met me." "I haven't." Reyes slowly shook his head. "Maybe you haven't." He looked toward Tessa inside the ambulance. "But I've been inside this house before." My chest tightened. "When?" His answer changed everything I thought I knew about the home I had just walked into. 6 months ago. "Your daughter was unconscious then too." 6 months ago. "Your daughter was unconscious then too." For a second I thought I'd misunderstood him. "That's impossible." Ray didn't argue. He simply looked toward the ambulance where his partner was securing Tessa to the stretcher. March 18th, late afternoon, we responded to this address for an unresponsive child. I felt the blood drain from my face. March 18th, I knew exactly where I'd been. Houston, negotiating an acquisition that had kept me away for 4 days. What happened to her? Reyes lowered his voice. She was extremely drowsy, confused when she regained consciousness, and her breathing was slower than normal. We transported her to Edward Hospital. No, I shook my head. I would know if my daughter had been taken to a hospital. Were you contacted? Nobody called me. Behind us, the front door opened. Tasha stepped outside carrying her purse. Reyes glanced at her, then back at me. The adult present told us you were overseas and couldn't be reached. I stared at Tasha. She stopped when she realized we were talking. I wasn't overseas, I said quietly. I was in Houston. Reyes's expression hardened slightly. That's what we were told. Why was Tessa unconscious? The suspected cause was excessive antihistamine exposure. My stomach turned. Accidental. At the time, we were told she had gotten into medication herself. I looked through the ambulance doors at my daughter. 6 months earlier, she'd been taken from this same house unconscious, and somehow an entire medical emergency had been erased from my life. How old was she? I asked, though I knew the answer. 7. A 7-year-old accidentally took enough medication to lose consciousness, went to the hospital, and nobody thought her father should know. Reyes held my gaze. Mr. Jamie, I can only tell you what I personally remember. You should request the complete medical record. Tasha approached us. What's going on? I turned toward her. Every instinct told me to demand an explanation. But 15 years of negotiations had taught me something useful. When someone doesn't know what you know, don't educate them too quickly. Nothing, I said. Reyes was explaining what they're doing for Tessa. Tasha looked at him. Then why are you both staring at me? Reyes answered before I could. We're taking your daughter to the hospital. Stepdaughter? She corrected automatically. It was such a small word, but at that moment I heard it differently. I climbed into the ambulance with Tessa. Tasha said she'd follow in her car. During the ride, I held my daughter's hand while Reyes monitored her. Can you tell me anything else about March? I asked quietly. Not without the records. Do you remember who was here? He looked at me. Your wife. Anyone else? Not that I remember. Did Tessa say anything? Reyes hesitated. She was barely responsive. That answer was enough. At the emergency department, doctors took Tessa immediately. I stood alone in the corridor while a nurse collected insurance information. When she asked for my policy number, something occurred to me. Medical treatment leaves records, ambulances leave records, prescriptions leave records. Even if Tasha had hidden the event from me, she couldn't erase every trace of it. I opened the insurance portal on my phone and searched Tessa's claims history. The March 18th emergency visit appeared almost immediately. Reyes had remembered correctly, but directly beneath it was another claim I didn't recognize. Then another, different dates, different facilities. I stopped scrolling and checked the calendar on my phone. The first unfamiliar date matched a trip I'd taken to Denver. The next matched London. Another matched Houston. I felt my pulse quicken. These weren't all hospital admissions, but they were medical claims involving Tessa that I had never seen. And every date had one thing in common. I hadn't been home for any of them. I stopped scrolling and went back to the beginning. If this was a coincidence, I wanted to prove it before my mind turned it into something worse. I opened my work calendar beside Tessa's insurance history and compared the dates one by one. March 18th, Houston. May 6th, Denver. July 22nd, London. September 14th, New York. Each time I had been away, some claims were emergency visits. Others were urgent care appointments or pharmacy charges, but none had ever been mentioned to me. I opened the first unfamiliar prescription, diphenhydramine, then another. Same medication, different date. A third prescription had been filled through a walk-in clinic across town rather than Tessa's pediatrician. I knew very little about medicine, but I knew patterns. My career had been built on finding them before signing contracts worth millions. By 17 in the morning, the pattern on my phone was impossible to ignore. Tessa became sick when I left town, and the medical trail repeatedly led back to sedating allergy medication. I called our pediatrician's after-hours line. The nurse couldn't discuss every detail without reviewing the file, but she confirmed something that made my stomach tighten. Their office had not prescribed those medications. Are you sure? I asked. I can only tell you what's documented in our system, mister. Would there be a reason an 8-year-old needed repeated prescriptions from another clinic? That would depend on the diagnosis. There isn't one that I know of. She advised me to speak directly with the emergency physician treating Tessa and request complete records in the morning. I thanked her and hung up. Then I started taking screenshots, not because I knew what I would do with them yet, but because suddenly I didn't trust anything to remain where I found it. A nurse appeared and told me Tessa was stable but still very drowsy. "Can I see her soon? The doctor wants to speak with you first." Dr. Fountain met me several minutes later. Her breathing is stable and we're monitoring her closely. "Do you know what caused this?" "We're waiting on toxicology, but her presentation is consistent with significant antihistamine exposure." The same phrase Reyes had used about March. "Could she have taken it accidentally?" "It's possible. That's why we need to know exactly what was in the home and how much she may have accessed." "What if this has happened before?" Dr. Fountain looked at me. "Has it?" I showed him the March claim and explained what Reyes had told me. Then I showed him the other dates. His expression became more serious with each one. "I didn't know about any of these until tonight." "Who supervises Tessa when you travel?" "My wife." He didn't accuse Tasha. Neither did I, but he asked me not to leave until someone from the hospital's child protection team could speak with me. That sentence made the situation real in a way the insurance records hadn't. I walked to the family waiting area and opened every claim I could access. The same name appeared repeatedly as responsible adult, Tasha James. Then the first noticed something else. Several of the walk-in clinic visits occurred late in the afternoon, hours before the emergency claims. Whatever had happened on those days might not have begun with an ambulance. I wrote every date into the Notes app on my phone and matched each against my travel itinerary. 7 medical events over 18 months. 7 times I was away. At 2:06 a.m., the elevator doors opened. Tasha stepped out wearing dark trousers, a cream blouse, and makeup. She looked less like someone who had rushed to the hospital after her stepdaughter collapsed, and more like someone arriving for an appointment. She spotted me immediately. "How is she?" "Stable." Tasha exhaled dramatically and reached for my arm. I stepped aside. Her eyes narrowed. "What's wrong with you?" I locked my phone before she could see the timeline. "Nothing." "Long night." "Did the doctors say what happened?" "They're still running tests." For several seconds, she studied my face, trying to determine how much I knew. I gave her nothing. Then Dr. Fountain approached us. "Mr. and Mrs. James." Tasha corrected him automatically. "I'm her stepmother." "Understood. We have preliminary toxicology information." Tasha's fingers tightened around her purse. Dr. Fountain continued. "Tessa appears to have a substantially elevated level of dianhydramine in her system." I watched Tasha instead of the doctor. Her surprise arrived a fraction too late. "She must have gotten into the medicine cabinet again," she said again. One word, one mistake. And suddenly, I knew Tasha remembered a previous incident she had never told me existed. "Again," I repeated. Tasha's eyes moved toward me. "What?" "You said she must have gotten into the medicine cabinet again." For half a second, she froze. Then her expression softened into concern. "Kevin, she's a child. Kids get into things. Has she done it before?" "Maybe once. I don't remember exactly." That answer told me more than an argument ever could. 6 months earlier, Tessa had been taken unconscious from our house after excessive antihistamine exposure, and Tasha had hidden the entire emergency from me. Now she was standing in a hospital hallway, pretending she could barely remember it. I wanted to confront her with Reyes's name, the March 18th ambulance record, and the 7 medical events I'd matched to my business trips. Instead, I nodded. "Maybe I'm just exhausted." Tasha relaxed slightly. "We both are, Dr. Fountain continued. Tessa's dianhydramine level is higher than we'd expect from a normal therapeutic dose. We need to understand how much she may have taken and when." Tasha answered before I could. "She knows where I keep allergy medicine. I've told her not to touch it." "Where is it stored?" "Bathroom cabinet, locked." Tasha hesitated. "No. Has Tessa ever deliberately taken medication before?" "Not deliberately." I watched her carefully. "Then what happened last time?" Tasha turned toward me. "Why are you interrogating me?" "I'm asking about my daughter." Her voice sharpened. "And I'm telling you she's impulsive sometimes when you're not around." There it was again. Not just an explanation, but an attempt to build a picture of Tessa as unreliable. Dr. Fountain didn't react. He simply wrote something down. We'll need a complete medication history. Tasha crossed her arms. Is that really necessary? She's stable. Yes, he said. It is. The confidence drained slightly from her face. A nurse approached and told us Tessa was awake enough for one parent to sit with her. Tasha immediately stepped forward. I'll go, I said. She stared at me. Kevin, she's used to me handling this when you're traveling. The sentence hit harder than she intended. I'm not traveling now. I walked past her. Tessa looked impossibly small beneath the hospital blanket. Her eyes opened when I sat beside her. Daddy, I'm right here. Her fingers found mine. Am I in trouble? No, absolutely not. Tasha said I was bad. I kept my voice steady. You're not bad. Tessa closed her eyes again. I wanted to ask 100 questions, but Dr. Fountain had warned me not to pressure her, so I stayed beside her until she drifted back to sleep. When I returned to the hallway, Tasha was on her phone. She ended the call as soon as she saw me. Who was that? Nobody important. At 3 a.m, a friend. She slipped the phone into her purse. Kevin, I think you're making this bigger than it needs to be. I looked at her. My daughter was unconscious on the floor and she's fine now. She was unconscious 6 months ago too. The color left Tasha's face. I'd said more than I intended, but now I watched carefully. Who told you that? Not what are you talking about? Not that never happened. Who told you? I had my answer. Does it matter? She recovered quickly. I was going to tell you. You were dealing with Houston and the doctor said she was fine. You told the paramedics I was overseas. I probably said out of town. They remember overseas. Then they remember wrong. Her answers were becoming faster, cleaner, practiced. I stopped pushing. You're right, this isn't the place. Tasha studied me, uncertain whether she'd convinced me. Then I added, go home, get some rest. I'll stay with Tessa. Kevin, I'll call if anything changes. After several seconds, she agreed. I watched her disappear into the elevator. Only when the doors closed did I return to Tessa's room. She was awake again, staring at the ceiling. I sat beside her and took her hand. Sweetheart, I'm going to ask you one thing. You don't have to answer if you don't want to. She looked at me. Okay. Do you know how the medicine got into your body tonight? Tessa's fingers tightened around mine. Her eyes immediately filled with fear. Then she whispered, It wasn't medicine, Daddy. Tasha calls it my sleepy drink. It wasn't medicine, Daddy. Tasha calls it my sleepy drink. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Tessa was staring at me with the frightened expression of a child who believes she had just admitted to doing something wrong. I forced my voice to remain gentle. You're not in trouble, sweetheart. I just need to understand. She nodded slowly. What is the sleepy drink? I don't know. What does it look like? Sometimes pink, sometimes just water. Who gives it to you? Her fingers tightened around mine. Zena. I felt anger rise so quickly that I had to look away. But this wasn't the moment for anger. Tessa needed her father, not an interrogator. When does she give it to you? I asked. When you go away. 4 words. That was all it took to connect every date I'd found in the insurance records. Houston, Denver, London, New York. Every time I travel, not every time. Tessa stared at the blanket. Mostly when her friends come over. What happens after you drink it? She struggled to explain. I get really sleepy, my legs feel funny and everything gets slow. Slow how? She thought for several seconds. Like the whole world is underwater. I had spent my career listening to executives lie about numbers worth millions of dollars without showing emotion. Nothing had ever required more control than sitting beside my 8-year-old daughter while she described being drugged in her own home. Did Tasha tell you why you had to drink it? She said it helps me calm down because I'm difficult when you're gone. You're not difficult. She says I make her tired. Tessa's voice became smaller. Sometimes, she says, if I tell you, you'll stop going to work and it'll be my fault. I closed my eyes briefly. Tasha hadn't only hidden what she was doing. She had made Tessa believe protecting meant staying silent. Listen to me. I leaned closer. Nothing that happened is your fault. Not tonight, not the other times. And you never have to protect me from the truth. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Are you mad at you? Never. Are you going to tell Tasha? That question stopped me. Why? Tessa looked toward the door. She'll be mad. She can't hurt you here. She gets really nice when other people are around. I felt something inside me break quietly. Tessa wasn't describing one frightening night, she was describing a system she'd learned to survive. "How long has there been a sleepy drink?" I asked. "I don't know. Since this year," she shrugged. "Maybe before my birthday." Her birthday had been 11 months earlier. I didn't ask more. She was exhausted, frightened, and still recovering. I kissed her forehead. "You did exactly the right thing, telling me. Can you stay? I'm not going anywhere." Within minutes, her eyes closed. I remained beside her, holding her hand and replaying every business trip from the previous year, all the hotel rooms, all the airport lounges, every call home. When Zena had told me Tessa was already asleep, I had interpreted those calls as normal family life. Now I wondered how many times already asleep had meant something else. Dr. Fountain entered quietly about 20 minutes later. I stepped into the hallway and told him exactly what Tessa had said without adding my own conclusions. His expression hardened. "Don't question her further tonight." "I won't. We need this handled through the proper child protection process. Repeated questioning can complicate both her recovery and any investigation." "What happens now?" "We document what she disclosed. Our social work team contacts Child Protective Services, and until this is assessed, she should not be alone with the person she identified." "Tasha?" "Yes." I looked toward Tessa's room. "She won't be." At 4:31 a.m. I opened my laptop in the waiting area. I didn't call Tasha. I didn't accuse her. I didn't warn her that Tessa had spoken. Instead, I created a new document and typed a title across the top. Tessa Incident Timeline. Beneath it, I entered every medical claim I'd found, every trip I'd taken, the March ambulance call Reyes remembered, and tonight's emergency. Then I added Tessa's exact words without changing them. Tasha calls it my sleepy drink. When you go away, like the whole world is underwater. When I finished, 7 medical events sat beside 7 periods when I had been away from home. For the first time, I wasn't looking at isolated emergencies anymore. I was looking at a pattern, and I knew exactly what I had to do next. Tasha still believed I had only discovered one bad night. I intended to keep it that way until I could prove every night she thought I'd never find. By sunrise, I had stopped asking myself whether Tasha had hurt my daughter. The question now was how many times she had done it, and how much of it I could prove. I wanted to drive home, put every medical record in front of her, and demand answers. Instead, I did the opposite. I stayed quiet. 15 years of corporate negotiations had taught me that anger tells the other side exactly what you know. Documentation doesn't. At 6:12 a.m., I called my executive assistant, Renee. "I need my complete travel history for the last 24 months. She sounded surprised. "Flights and hotels, everything. Flights, hotels, expense reports, meeting dates, and HR confirmed travel records. When do you need it?" "Today." I didn't explain why. Then I requested Tessa's complete insurance history and every available medical claim from the previous 18 months. By mid-morning, the first records began arriving. I opened a spreadsheet and built the timeline one line at a time. March 18th, Houston, emergency transport for altered consciousness. May 6th, Denver, walk-in clinic visit followed by a pharmacy charge. July 22nd, London, another medical claim. September 14th, New York, urgent care. Each event aligned with a period when I was away. Then I found the prescriptions. Diphenhydramine appeared repeatedly. Different dates, different providers, the same pattern. I called Tessa's pediatrician and learned that several prescriptions had not originated from their office. They had come through walk-in clinics where doctors wouldn't necessarily know her full history. By noon, Renee emailed my certified travel calendar. I placed it beside the medical records. The overlap was almost perfect. 7 incidents, 7 absences. 7 times Tasha had been the adult responsible for Tessa. I printed everything. Paper made the pattern impossible to dismiss. At 12:37, Tasha called. I stared at her name before answering. "How's Tessa?" she asked. "Better. When is she coming home?" "Doctors haven't decided." "Kevin, about last night." "Not now. I know you're upset, but you need to understand she has always been difficult when you're away." I wrote the sentence down word for word. "What do you mean by difficult?" "Emotional, defiant. Sometimes she refuses to sleep." "And what do you do?" Silence. Then Zena laughed softly, what every parent does. I calm her down. I looked at the line I'd written from Tessa's disclosure. "Tasha calls it my sleepy drink." "Of course," I said. "We'll talk later. I ended the call before my voice betrayed me. That afternoon, hospital caseworker Joyce Tanner arrived. She had already reviewed Dr. Fountain's notes and Tessa's initial disclosure. I handed her the timeline. She read the first page, then the second. You assembled this today. The records already existed. I just put them in the same place. Her finger stopped at the travel column. You're saying every medical event happened while you were away? Everyone I found. And you weren't informed? Not once. I showed her the March ambulance record, the pharmacy claims, the walk-in clinic visits, and Renee's HR confirmed travel dates. Then I gave her Reyes's name. He responded to the March incident. He remembered the house before I knew there had been an incident. Joyce stopped taking notes. Mr. Jamie, this changes the nature of our assessment. How one unexplained overdose can be accidental. Repeated episodes with a consistent caregiver and a consistent absence pattern require a different level of investigation. I nodded. What do you need from me? Nothing reckless. Don't confront your wife. Don't search accounts you don't legally have access to. Don't coach Tessa. Preserve what you already have and let us obtain the rest properly. That's exactly what I intend to do. Joyce gathered copies of the timeline. Before leaving, she turned back. Can Tessa return home without Tasha having access to her? Yes. Then start thinking about how to make that possible. After she left, I looked at the spreadsheet again. Until that morning, Tasha had controlled the story because every incident had happened separately while I was somewhere else. Now they were all on one page. The pattern was no longer hidden. And for the first time, someone outside our family could see it too. I didn't need Tasha to confess. I needed enough evidence that her explanation would no longer matter. By the following morning, Joyce Tanner had stopped calling what happened to Tessa an incident. She called it a pattern. DCFS had reviewed the hospital report, Reyes's account from 6 months earlier, my travel records, the insurance claims, and the dates of the walk-in clinic visits. At 9:20 a.m., Joyce called me from her office. Kevin, we're elevating Tessa's case to a priority investigation. I stood beside my daughter's hospital window and watched traffic move below. What does that mean? It means we have enough concern to treat continued contact with Tasha as a potential safety risk while we investigate. I looked toward Tessa. She was sitting in bed drawing a house with an enormous yellow sun above it. Can you keep Tasha away from her? We can recommend restrictions, but I want you to speak with a family attorney immediately about an emergency protective order. Joyce gave me a name, Jennifer Moss, a lawyer who specialized in high-conflict custody and child protection cases. I called from the hospital hallway. Jennifer agreed to meet me that afternoon. Her office was 12 minutes away, but walking through the door felt like crossing into a different life. 48 hours earlier, I had believed I had a marriage with problems. Now, I was carrying a folder documenting 7 medical events involving my daughter. Jennifer read everything without interrupting. She spent the longest time on the timeline matching my travel dates to Tessa's medical records. Then she read Dr. Fountain's notes containing Tessa's disclosure. Has Tasha contacted Tessa since hospitalization? She's tried. Have you allowed it? No. Good. Jennifer closed the folder. Kevin, based on what you've shown me, I believe we have grounds to request emergency protection today. Today? Without notifying Tasha first. That's the purpose of emergency relief. We show the court why advance notice could create additional risk. I felt my jaw tighten. I don't want her near Tessa again. Then we do this correctly. No threats, no confrontation, no social media. You let the documentation speak. That was exactly what I needed to hear. Over the next 2 hours, Jennifer organized the case into something a judge could understand quickly. The first known overdose, the concealed ambulance visit, repeated medical claims, my verified absences, the elevated dianhydramine level, and Tessa's statement about the sleepy drink. Joyce provided the appropriate child protection documentation through official channels. Reyes's prior response was being verified separately. Nothing depended on my anger or interpretation. It depended on records. At 4:16 that afternoon, Tasha texted me, "Why aren't you answering?" "I'm coming to the hospital tonight," I showed Jennifer. "Don't argue with her," she said. I replied with one sentence, "Tessa is resting. Please do not come until the hospital says visitors are appropriate." Tasha answered almost immediately, "She's my daughter too, Kevin. You can't keep her from me." I stared at the screen. Months earlier, that sentence might have made me question myself. Now, I remembered Tessa whispering she gets really nice when other people are around. Jennifer photographed the exchange for the file. She's helping us, she said. How? By showing urgency. The emergency request went before a judge the next morning. I didn't make a speech. Jennifer did most of the talking. She presented the timeline, the medical evidence, the prior concealed incident, and the ongoing child protection investigation. The judge asked only a few questions before reading Tessa's disclosure again. Then came the sentence I'd been waiting to hear. Pending further proceedings, Tasha was to have no direct or indirect contact with Tessa, and was prohibited from returning to the family residence while the protective order remained in effect. I lowered my head and exhaled. It wasn't victory. It was permission to finally make my daughter's world safe. Outside the courtroom, Jennifer handed me a certified copy. Now follow this exactly. Change access codes, secure the house, notify the school and approve caregivers, let law enforcement handle enforcement. My phone rang before I reached the elevator. Tasha. I didn't answer. A second call followed. Then a third. She still didn't know the order had been signed. She still believed she could return home, explain everything away, and regain control of the story. But by then, Joyce had already contacted investigators about the medical evidence, and law enforcement wanted to speak with Tasha directly. I looked at Jennifer. I know where she'll be tomorrow at noon. Where? Sullivan's every Thursday. Same table, same group of friends. Jennifer studied me. Then don't go there. I wasn't planning to. I folded the protective order and placed it inside my jacket. For the first time since finding Tessa on that hallway floor, I understood that I didn't need to stand in front of Tasha when the consequences arrived. The evidence could walk through that door without me. By Thursday morning, Tasha was legally forbidden from contacting Tessa, but she still had a key to our house. I intended to change that before she learned what had happened. At 7:15, while Tessa remained under observation at the hospital, I met a locksmith at home. We changed every exterior lock, reset the garage code, disabled Tasha's smart home access, and removed her fingerprint from the front door system. Then I called Tessa's school. I emailed the certified protective order and instructed them that Tasha was no longer authorized to pick her up, contact her through staff, or receive information about her schedule. Next came the pediatrician, insurance account, emergency contacts, and every family service where Tasha's name could give her access to my daughter. I wasn't erasing a wife from my life. I was closing doors between an adult under investigation and an 8-year-old child who was afraid of her. At 9:30, Tasha called again. I let it ring. A text followed. Kevin, enough. I'm coming home after lunch and we're going to talk like adults. I showed it to Jennifer. Don't respond, she said. The order is active. Let law enforcement handle contact. Joyce called 20 minutes later. Investigators had reviewed the hospital evidence and wanted Tasha brought in for questioning concerning suspected child endangerment. Do you know where she is? Joyce asked. I did. Every Thursday at noon, Tasha met the same 4 women at Sullivan's. She called it networking. Though from what I'd seen, it was mostly expensive salads, wine, and conversations about schools, vacations, and houses. Image mattered to Tasha. She carefully controlled what people saw. I gave Joyce the location and stopped there. I didn't ask what officers planned to do. I didn't need to. At 11:38, I was back beside Tessa when Tasha sent another message. I'm at lunch. I'll be home around 2. We need to put this ridiculous hospital situation behind us. I read it twice. Ridiculous hospital situation. Tessa had been unconscious. Toxicology showed excessive dianhydramine. A previous ambulance visit had been hidden from me. 7 medical events aligned with my travel, and Tessa had described a drink that made the world feel underwater. Yet Tasha still seemed convinced this was something she could explain away when she got home. At 11:56, Joyce called. We're moving forward. Do you need me there? No, that was the answer I wanted. This wasn't a confrontation between an angry husband and his wife. It was an investigation supported by medical records, child protection findings, and a court order. I stayed with Tessa. At 12:14, my phone began vibrating. Tasha, I didn't answer again. Then again, a message appeared. What did you do? Another followed. Seconds later. Call me now. I turned the phone face down. Tessa was coloring beside me. Is that Tasha? She asked. Yes. Her crayon stopped moving. Is she coming here? No. Are you sure? I looked directly at her. I'm sure. She studied my face as though deciding whether she could believe something that important. Then she returned to her picture. At 12:21, Jennifer called. The order has been served. I stood and walked toward the window, and law enforcement is with her now. I closed my eyes. For 2 days, part of me had imagined being present when Tasha finally realized she couldn't talk her way out of what she'd done. But standing beside Tessa, I understood why staying away mattered. This wasn't supposed to be revenge. The purpose of everything we built was sitting 8 feet behind me, drawing a son of a house. What happens next? I asked. That's up to investigators and prosecutors. Your job is Tessa. After the call, I returned to my chair. Tessa held up her drawing. 2 people stood in front of the house holding hands. That's us, she said. Where's Tasha? I asked before realizing I shouldn't have. Tessa looked down at the page. She doesn't live there anymore. I swallowed. No, sweetheart, she doesn't. Across town, Tasha was finally being forced to answer questions she had avoided for months. I didn't see the moment the officers approached her table. I didn't hear what she said when the protective order was placed in front of her. But before that lunch was over, the woman who had controlled every version of the story was about to discover that this time, everyone at the table would see a version she couldn't rewrite. At 12:26, while I sat beside Tessa at the hospital, Tasha was finishing lunch at Sullivan's with 4 women who knew her as polished, generous, and endlessly patient with her stepdaughter. I know what happened next because Joyce later walked me through the report. Tasha was laughing when Joyce entered the restaurant with 2 Neepville police officers. At first, she apparently didn't understand why they were approaching her table. Then Joyce placed the protective order in front of her. Tasha Jamie? One officer asked. Yes. What's this about? You've been served with an emergency protective order, effective immediately. You are prohibited from contacting Tessa Jamie or returning to the family residence. The women around the table went silent. Tasha picked up the document and scanned the first page. This is ridiculous. My husband is upset because his daughter got into some allergy medicine. Joyce remained standing. The court has reviewed information that raises serious concerns about Tessa's safety. Kevin gave you that information. The investigation includes medical records, hospital documentation, prior emergency responses, and statements made by Tessa. That was when Tasha's expression changed. Statements? She looked around at her friends. She's 8. She gets confused. One of the officers asked Tasha to stand. Why? We need you to come with us for questioning regarding suspected child endangerment. Tasha lowered her voice. Can we discuss this somewhere private? Image? Even then, Image. Ma'am, please stand. You don't understand. Kevin travels constantly. I'm the one who actually takes care of that child. Nobody answered. Tasha turned toward the women at her table. Tell them. You know how difficult Tessa can be when Kevin's gone. Not one of them moved. According to Joyce, that was the moment Tasha began losing control. This is insane. She takes allergy medicine. Children make mistakes, Joyce replied. The investigation will determine what happened. Tasha grabbed her purse. Then I'll call Kevin and straighten this out. The order prohibits indirect contact regarding Tessa as well. You need to read it carefully. He's my husband. That doesn't override the order. Tasha reached for her phone anyway. One officer stopped her and repeated the instruction to stand. By then, people at nearby tables were watching. Tasha's voice became sharper. Do you know who my husband is? Joyce later told me that sentence stayed with her. Tasha still believed my name could protect her. The officer answered simply, Yes, ma'am. His information is in the report. Then he asked her once more to stand. This time she did. When the officer told her she was being detained in connection with the investigation, Tasha pulled her arm away. You're arresting me because an 8-year-old told a story. Turn around, please. Kevin did this. Turn around. The handcuffs closed around her wrists in the middle of the restaurant. One of her friends looked down at the table. Another moved Tasha's purse away from an unfinished glass of wine. Nobody defended her. Nobody followed when the officers escorted her toward the exit. At 12:41, my phone rang. Joyce. I stepped into the hospital hallway before answering. It's done, she said. She's in custody. I leaned against the wall. I'd imagined those words giving me satisfaction. They didn't. Did she say anything? A lot. Most of it blamed you or Tessa. I closed my eyes. Of course. Joyce explained that investigators would now seek the complete medical and pharmacy records and interview the relevant providers. The protective order remained in force regardless of what happened with criminal charges. Kevin, don't contact her. I won't. And don't discuss the investigation with Tessa beyond what she needs to feel safe. Understood. I returned to the room. Tessa was watching cartoons. She looked at me immediately. Was that about Tasha? Yes. Her shoulders tightened. I sat beside her. She can't come here. She can't come home. And she can't contact you for how long? Long enough for the adults whose job it is to protect you to figure everything out. She studied me so I don't have to drink the sleepy drink anymore. My throat tightened. Never again. Tessa leaned against me without another word. That was the moment the arrest finally meant something. Not because Tasha had been embarrassed at Sullivan's. Not because handcuffs had replaced the perfect image she'd spent years protecting. It mattered because the little girl beside me finally understood that the person who frightened her no longer controlled the door to her own home. Later that afternoon, Jennifer called to remind me what came next. Locks, access codes, school authorization, medical contacts, every remaining connection Tasha could use to reach Tessa. I looked down at my daughter resting against my shoulder. For 15 years, I'd made a living closing complicated deals, but this time, there would be no negotiation, no compromise, and no second round of terms. Tasha had spent months waiting for me to leave town before hurting my daughter. From that day forward, I intended to make sure she never got another opportunity. Tessa came home 2 days later. Before leaving the hospital, she asked me the same question 3 times. Tasha really can't be there. Each time I gave her the same answer. She won't be there. When we pulled into the driveway, Tessa stayed in the passenger seat staring at the house. I didn't rush her. The locks had been changed. The garage code was new. Tasha's access to the security system was gone. Her name had been removed from Tessa's school pickup list, medical contacts, and every account that could give her information about my daughter. Jennifer had made sure the protective order covered what mattered. Joyce had made sure Tessa's case remained active. The criminal investigation would continue without us trying to control it. Ready? I asked. Tessa nodded. We walked inside together. She stopped in the hallway almost exactly where I'd found her unconscious days earlier. I watched her face, afraid the memory would overwhelm her. Instead, she took a long breath. It smells different. Different how she thought about it, like when you open a window. I had to look away for a second. Nothing about the house had physically changed except the locks, but to Tessa, safety apparently had a smell. That evening, I ordered deep dish pizza from her favorite place. We ate on the couch and watched a documentary about sea auditors because Tessa had recently decided they were the funniest animals on Earth. Halfway through the movie, she asked, "Are you going away for work again?" The question was quiet. Not for a while. Because of me? Because I need to be here. She looked down at her pizza. I don't want you to lose your job. Then I understood how deeply Tasha's words had gotten inside her. Tessa, listen to me. My job is important. You are more important. And none of this happened because I traveled. It happened because an adult made choices she wasn't allowed to make. So, it's not my fault. Not even 1%. She leaned against me. Later, her breathing became slow and steady. For a second, the sound terrified me. I touched her shoulder. She stirred, annoyed. "Daddy, I'm sleeping." I almost laughed. I know, but I didn't know not anymore. For months, sleep had meant something different in this house. Now my daughter was simply exhausted after pizza and a movie. Sleeping because she felt safe enough to close her eyes. I carried her upstairs and tucked her into bed. At the doorway, she whispered, "You're staying home tonight?" "I'm right downstairs." "Promise. Promise." The weeks afterward weren't simple. Tessa began working with a child therapist. Some nights she slept normally, other nights she checked twice to make sure the bedroom door wasn't locked from the outside. I stopped demanding quick recovery from either of us. Healing wasn't another deal I could close by Friday afternoon. The legal process continued. Investigators obtained additional medical and pharmacy records, while Jennifer handled the separation and every necessary court filing. I followed her advice and stayed out of Tasha's way. I didn't need revenge. I needed distance, accountability, and a daughter who no longer feared being alone in her own home. Months later, I reduced my travel schedule. Not because Tessa needed me watching every second, but because I finally understood something I'd missed while building a successful career. Providing a beautiful house wasn't the same as knowing what happened inside it when I wasn't there. One Saturday morning, I found Tessa making pancakes in the kitchen. She spilled batter across the counter and laughed instead of immediately apologizing. That tiny sound meant more to me than any courtroom outcome ever could. I had spent 15 years telling clients that the most dangerous part of any agreement was usually hidden in the fine print. Somehow I'd forgotten to read the fine print of my own family. I couldn't change that. I could only make sure I never ignored it again. That night, Tessa fell asleep beside me halfway through another sea otter documentary. No sleepy drink, no fear, no one waiting for me to leave town. Just my daughter breathing peacefully against my shoulder. For the first time in a very long time, sleep in our house meant exactly what it was supposed to mean. She was safe.